Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October 28th meeting of SIG Auth. Got a couple items on the agenda today. So 120 code freeze is approaching, and let's figure out what we need to review and get done before 120. So pulls of note, I think Jordan pointed these out. Kube control, credential provider extraction. We talked about this a couple meetings ago.
Andrew's made good progress on this. He got feedback from the maintainers of the of the existing entry providers, which was good. And there are reference implementations that show that this will let us externalize the Azure and the AWS credential providers. And Walter has been involved on the review, and the GCP credential provider is simplistic enough that I'm sure that that can be externalized as well. So that is what I had asked for, and that is good. And so this is on my list to review this week. Andrew set up a meeting on Friday to go over that. So
is this a alpha API?
Yes.
Yep.
V1 alpha 1.
So
perfect.
I pushed for sort of more rigor around it, just so that we can hopefully get a single release in alpha and then go to beta. Like, I didn't want it to be like we release alpha and then realize, oh yeah, this doesn't work at all. Like we tried to externalize these and it didn't actually work. So I'm pleased with the amount of engagement that there's been with the people we expect to be using this right away. So that's good.
Awesome. Do you need any help, or do you expect this to go just fine for 120?
I think it will go fine. I think from auth side, there's not a lot there. Most of the people I expect to have concerns are like API related or node cloud related, and they're already involved. So
cool. Next one, credential provider cluster info. This was added to the CAP.
Yep.
So is this just pending review as well?
I got a review pass today. I think it's pretty close. It's mostly just like which packages do we put these things in to get imports going the right direction, and then making sure we have good tests for like round tripping this config. So what this lets an exec credential provider do is say, I want information about the cluster. So like the host name, insecure status, CA data, stuff like that. And yeah, really the only notable changes from when Mo was working on this last release are that receiving cluster information is opt-in. So we're not gonna like send a giant envar full of CA data to existing plugins unless they ask for it.
Okay.
And
sounds reasonable.
We settled on including the insecure preference expressed in the kube config. The way I sleep at night with that is that this would let a strict credential provider refuse to return token credentials if they were going to be used insecurely. More realistically, it means that exec credential providers that connect to the cluster will do so using the same level of security that the kube config is set up with, which, if they're going to give back a token and then kube control or whatever is immediately going to turn around and send it without verifying TLS, like, is that that different, then yeah. Anyway, I sleep at night saying a strict thing could refuse to return tokens for insecure purposes. So.
And then CSI Driver service account token plumbed. This.
Have you reviewed this one?
I have not.
Okay.
Yeah, for this one, SIG Story has reviewed and approved. So right now we need the API and the SIG Auth review.
Okay.
I'll do the SIG Auth code review. Do you want to just review the API, Jordan?
Yeah, I'd like to get. Did Michelle take a look at it from the API side or just from the storage side? Do you know?
He reviewed some of the API side, like the API related code, and but she also would like a review from you and from the API side.
Okay, I'll sync up with Michelle and kind of see what she did on it. She does really thorough reviews on stuff, so if she has already done a pass, that makes me feel a lot better about this.
Cool.
Yep.
All right, those are the pulls of note. And then for the discussion topic, we have the beta GA stuff. And I think we were trying to figure out whether we would make some flags required as part of GA or beta.
Yeah.
And trying to decide whether it would be part of the GA or the beta, even though they're happening at the same time. So the end result is the same.
Well, okay, so
I guess if you turn beta off is the only
we've
difference.
got two features. One is the ability for the API server to mint tokens and for pods to opt in to asking for projected tokens. Like that's one feature. And that's been around for a long time, and that's a new thing that pods would opt into, and so it's a lot easier to graduate that and not worry about breaking existing pods that aren't opting into that. So I think that is what is ready to go to GA based on like how long it's been around, and it's in use in multiple places, and so the token request and token projected volume, whatever, like those two I think can go GA in 120. The question is, do we make it required to enable those APIs? And that's what I'm not sure about. So if it's GA, then the intent has been to have conformance tests for those APIs, which means that, yeah, you have to enable it. Today we have conformance tests which require service account tokens, like require clusters to behave a certain way, which implies service account token minting. And the bound tokens are the desired future state for service account tokens. So I think it's reasonable to enable token requests to GA in 120 and require the API server to have those arguments and have a conformance test for it.
Okay, so the features becoming required will be part of the GA. I think that is desirable if you say that that is okay. I don't know what considerations we have around a command line breaking on update for Kube API server.
Yeah.
When was the last time that happened?
It's been a really, really long time.
Yeah.
So an alternative is to promote the feature to GA, but keep it opt-in until bound service account tokens are GA.
Does it make it better if we want to phase out the old tokens? Does deferring this make that situation better? Or are we just putting off the pain?
I think if token request graduated to GA but remained opt-in, I would expect the deployment mechanisms that we have influence over, like kubeadm and kubeup and the CI deployments, I would expect us to start enabling token request.
Which one of those don't? Does kubeadmin not today?
It does not today. So
kubeup does, and we have test coverage.
Yes.
I can check cops.
Like I said,
and then I guess
the current conformance stuff requires service account tokens. The current way service account tokens are provisioned is less secure than this mechanism. And so, like, the argument that we don't want to enable this because of security when the tokens you're provisioning with the current mechanism are like visible and secrets, and like, I don't really buy that argument. So then it purely becomes
definitely
like turn on upgrade requiring new flags.
Right. That's kind of the sticky point for me. But if you are okay with it, I'm definitely okay with it. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate.
Yeah.
But if we don't do this now, we eventually will do this for the bound service account token volume, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess in 120, token request graduating, still being opt-in, updating kubeadm, like the deployments that we use and use in CI and have influence over to enable this.
What is
And
the
then
point of graduating it in that scenario?
I think it's actually a reasonable position to say we're not going to start adding flags and like enabling stuff until the feature is considered mature enough to graduate. And so, like, it's a signal that this has soaked and gotten test coverage and been part of scale tests and like been used in real scenarios, and it's reasonable to start enabling this. So practically what it means is that kubeadm can start configuring these signer key arguments, and it doesn't break the conformance job that runs with all beta features turned off. So
okay. So there is some benefit in graduating these two features to GA without enabling them. And then I guess the plan would be
without requiring them, you mean?
Yeah, without requiring them
Okay.
to be enabled. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I am on the fence. I could see requiring them. I think it's better for consumers to be able to write like portable pod specs and say, like, I can use a projected token volume and like my pod will work and I don't have to worry about how the API server was configured. So I see benefit to making it required.
What is it? 2, 3 extra flags, 2 extra flags.
2 minimum.
Yeah, 2 required.
If we want to be explicit about the API audiences, then it's 3.
All right. How do we decide? So there was discussion with the cluster lifecycle folks. I think I would probably reach out to the main deployments that we know of, kubeatom, kubeup, maybe some of the clouds, and like do a check of like if this has been optional, it's been on, here's how long it's existed, here's how it's been tested. Like this is the forward-looking plan for service account tokens. If this became required in 120, would that be problematic?
I have one question.
Yeah.
Okay, so if I guess the questions around the testing and the requirements, like having the flags on versus the implementation. If I set the issuer to a URL that's not the cluster, then how does that change conformance, right? Like, or how does that affect conformance?
So the conformance stuff would check for the presence of the API.
Okay.
And do a token.
And it would check that a token obtained via that API was valid against the API server. So it would be much more audience focused than issuer focused.
Okay. All right. No, that makes sense.
And any, this is already turned on in AWS, right?
Yeah.
Which reach out to.
Yeah, the degrees of freedom we give configurers, deployers, there we go, in terms of like setting the issuer and setting, you know, the location of the discovery documents for these things. Like those degrees of freedom are intentional. So conformance isn't going to mandate like a particular issuer or a particular discovery location. It's much more like, is there a tokens API that I can get tokens from for a service account? And can I make a pod that asks for a projected token? Those are the things we would test.
Cool. So how does not making it a required field affect conformance? Would this still be, would the GA feature still be covered in conformance, but, or would this also need to be defined?
Yeah, as long as we add the flags to the kubeadmin. As long as kubeadmin has those flags, I think the conformance test will pass.
It'll pass an RCI. But the question is, if we add a conformance test that requires this API to be present, but leave the flags optional, other people who run their own API servers could choose to run an API server that didn't set up those flags, and then they would not pass conformance. But they could run their API server that way. So that's the difference. Like, we need the deployment mechanisms we use in CI to set up the servers in a way that they will pass conformance. So things like kubeatom and kubeup. But we have the option to add a test to conformance and say, this is what you need to do to be a conformant 120 cluster. And then people who want to run API servers differently say, you know what, I really don't want that token API for whatever reason. Can do that. They just don't pass conformance.
So it sounds like we want this even if we don't make the field required.
Yeah, so I would push for a conformance test, and I would push to configure it in kubeatom and kubeup, and I would want to know if the main deployment mechanisms and deployers have concerns and weren't planning to enable this for some reason. Like, if they weren't, that would maybe make me rethink this or try to understand what those concerns were. But leaving the flags optional, fixing kubeatom and kubeup, and adding a conformance test, to me seems like sort of a nice middle ground where we don't hard break you, but like we're pushing in the direction that we need to be to improve service account tokens long term with conformance tests and with our reference deployments.
Awesome. I think that sounds like a reasonable place to end up for the 120 release. So let's get these 3 done.
Okay.
And sit on this one a little bit and reach out. Maybe defer that to a later release.
Okay.
Cool. Anything else on that topic or 120 loose ends?
I don't.
What's the result? What's the result of the AI will be? So if everybody says it's not painful, are we going to make it required or still like defer to post-GA? It's still like, how do we make the decision?
Yeah, so if it's unanimous, this is fine. I'd say let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's do it now.
Yes, we need to reach out quickly as time is short. But I think we can make progress with the GA promotion and the conformance test and the bound service account token bits, and then make this bit is basically a single validation check at startup, and so that can be a late breaking call based on the feedback we get.
Mm-hmm. And I think we will get a good result from the conformance test, most likely.
Yeah. I did want to just call out that we have a working upgrade test exercising this, which was like a Herculean effort on Shihong's part, which thank you so much. And I'm so sorry that we didn't have like a reasonable framework for you to use, but they got upgrade tests working again and added a test for this. So if you open up the CI test grids link, actually, we now have an upgrade test, which is exercising like upgrading a cluster from using the old style, like running pods with the old style of service account tokens, doing a cluster upgrade and enabling this feature, making sure the old pods that have the old tokens mounted still work, and a new pod that uses the new style of token also works. So thank you.
Wow, look how red, or look how green these are.
Well,
pretty awesome.
That was when we were getting the test working. So
I mean, looks pretty healthy now.
yeah. Anyway.
Awesome. Nice work, Xiong.
CJ suspicious.
Yeah,
All
are they
green
doing
takes
anything?
1 second to run. I don't believe it.
Just for it to be plausible.
Does anybody have any other topics before we move on to the standing items?
This isn't really for discussion here, but if people missed it, there's a thread in SIG architecture around label, metadata, policy stuff. So I will drop a link into the agenda. But there was a mailing list thread, and it got brought up in a meeting, and no one was really ready to talk about it, so it got kicked to the next SIG architecture meeting. But it's probably relevant to the interests of people in this group. So
it got kicked to the next SIG architecture meeting, and still no one was ready to talk about it, so it got kicked down the road again. But yeah, it's currently on the agenda for next meeting.
Cool. Thanks for
I
the
also
announcement.
Another announcement. This came up on the SIG Auth Slack channel, but we haven't talked about pod security policies in a while, and there's still a lot of open questions around the future of that. So I'm going to take an action item to try and write up a summary of everything we've talked about to date. And then next SIG Auth in 2 weeks, we'll reopen that discussion and try and figure out a path forward.
Sounds good. Thank you. All right, Flakes.
this is a resurfacing of the same cluster API issue. It's basically running 120 tests against a 117 API server, and the API isn't there. So I reached out to Cluster Lifecycle and asked them to take a look and figure out why that was happening. So
Interesting.
These two looked good. The CSI Driver ones had some flakes, and I wasn't sure. I mean, by good, I guess that means absent. These were the ones that I was looking at. I wasn't sure where these surface, but they seemed like 25 to 50% flaky, which is not great. Does this dashboard get looked at in the CSI secret driver meeting? Do you know? And does anybody know?
Is Rita on the call?
No.
Maybe we can ask over email then.
Okay.
And SIG Auth was pretty consistent, 100%.
Oh, I forgot to update our queries. We have needs triage labels now. Maybe I'll go do that for the next meeting. Can you zoom in a little bit? Do you mind?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. $500. I think this is.
Thank you.
I think I might have overshot it. Oh no. Still going. Oh God. 250. All right. Role associated with user via role binding in same namespace.
I think this is just saying they want to be able to apply policy at like vastly more granular levels than we allow.
I mean, I think they can do what they want. It's just really fiddly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're able to get the above requirement working by configuring a rule with resource name mapped to pod name. Yeah. That's yeah.
Do exec requests go through admission, webhook admission?
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah, they do.
So you could probably do this for this specific cube control exec case with admission control.
CJ, you want to say if you want to do it with RBAC, what you're doing is the right way. You could also do it with an admission plugin that would let you intercept and do custom things.
Yeah, I can go fill that in.
Thanks.
Wait, you're saying that because exec requests go through admission?
Yeah.
Is that true even if it's a exec with a get request?
Yeah, because it's modeled as a connect operation.
Oh. Okay.
Are we confident? I trust Jordan.
I'm pretty sure I've done this. Like, I'm pretty sure I put connect in the rules for a admission webhook.
Yeah, but we're using a get or a post.
So the
It
REST
doesn't
handler
show-
maps all the connect methods that are supported to the connect operation, but then admission unconditionally routes connect to, or the filter unconditionally routes connect requests to admission.
PSP.
Oh, this looks fun. Do you remember this, Tim?
Yeah, I was just
equivalent annotations.
I was just digging into this issue. It looks like maybe this was a regression that broke the annotation validation when SecComp went to GA in 119.
So I think we translate Docker default, a Docker default annotation to a runtime default field.
Yeah.
And then PSP requires literal matches. So PSP needs to do an equivalence check to say, like, if you've got runtime default or Docker default, then we allow the runtime default field, maybe.
Yeah. Is this? It was unclear to me from the error here if. I see. Yeah, it looks like maybe this might be what you just said, but the pod gets automatically converted to the runtime default, but that breaks clusters that only were whitelisting Docker default in PSP. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it is a regression. Can you either look at a fix or work with the person who did the SecComp graduation?
Yeah, I'll assign it to them and leave a comment with what needs to be done.
Thanks. Yeah, soon. Thank you. We should, do we have the same issue for AppArmor? There was no like Docker default, runtime default equivalent for AppArmor. Okay.
Yeah, right.
Let's just not make the same mistakes when we replay the same playbook.
Environment variables go in the process table, depending on. Isn't this what a kube control exec auth plugin is? Are people doing this?
The process table is also only visible to root on, it's a privileged thing on most operating systems. But I think
so it would also have access to the kubeconfig file. And
yeah, I think the right answer here is this is what exec plugins are for.
Yeah, I mean, you can do it today with a kubeconfig file. You could do it with a layered kubeconfig file. Yeah. I think that's a good answer, Matt. Would you like to?
Yeah, sure. I'll respond.
See, this is
Thank you.
This is distributing the load of dealing with SIG Auth issues. Thank you all for being.
While we're in a break, Jordan, do you remember if can a pod exec map in RBAC to either a get or a create, or is it also an update? Can I put to that endpoint?
A get or create. You either get or post. I think.
Like, I think the standard case, it shows up as a create in RBAC because you post.
It's a get or a create.
Okay.
So from authorization perspective, you could get pods exec or you could create pods exec. From an emission perspective, they both come in as a connect operation.
Tim, you want to explain this one?
Yeah, sorry, I was still looking at the SecComp thing. So this, I was kind of thinking more about the redirect vulnerabilities that we had. I don't even know if I can call them recently at this point, but and how we would be able to identify those, since they would show up as totally new requests in the audit logs. And if we were able to if we propagated the audit ID across those, then we could easily identify in audit logs like a request with the same audit ID resulted in a totally different action. And that would point to that would point to that being exploited. So sort of a tool to detect when that vulnerability was being exploited.
Was this the one where I was asking if we, like, how much control over the audit ID we give to the requester?
Yeah. So I believe if you scroll down, I think I might have answered that on here, unless it was on Slack, I can't remember. Yeah, so we prefer using the audit ID from the request header. So anyone can set any audit ID that they want.
To do. Figure out what this should do.
But what does it mean then?
The audit ID?
Yeah. I guess it's just like you want to look something up in audit logs later.
Yeah, the idea was that it was a way to, when you have, let's see, there's a couple of uses. One is if you have different request stages set. So you want to say request receive, response started, response complete audit events, and you want to be able to kind of collapse it all into a single event. They would all have the same audit ID. Also, if you are collecting audit events from external or extension API servers, then when the Kube API server forwards the request to the extension API server, it will set the audit ID header, so you can correlate those requests there.
So right now, the doc on the audit ID field for audit events says a unique audit ID generated for each request.
To do audit.
Would it make sense to like always include a generated portion that we know is unique?
Mm-hmm.
But then if they provide a user specified thing, like append that or prepend that or something. So it's like the user said, this is a foo request, and this set of things was what the API server observed.
So that's sort of what we do for source IPs, is we always include the request IP. So the last IP that the request is coming from is always the last one in the source IP chain. But if you're bouncing through proxies or whatever, we do include everything from the X forwarded for header.
And it's like, I don't know if this is good or not, but here's what they said, so here you go.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, we could do a similar thing there and have audit ID chain or something like that.
So what about this? Fixing this to do, is that sufficient?
So that if we did, so right now what the server does, if the client gives it an audit ID, the server's like, all right, cool, I'll use that. What's missing is the server like telling the client in the response, here's the audit ID that was assigned to your request. You should, like, if you want to replay this in a redirect following scenario, like, here it is. So we don't communicate that back to the client.
I think the biggest risk is if someone is doing like post-processing on audit logs and discarding duplicate events or deduping events based on the audit ID. They could end up discarding a whole bunch of information if an attacker makes a bunch of risky requests with the same audit ID.
Yeah. So right now, audit ID and stage are, like, looking at the API definition, I would expect to be a unique key, right? And they're not necessarily if the client starts providing this. So is that like the three pieces? Like maybe fix the uniqueness bit in a way that lets the client contribute information, but still like preserves the uniqueness guarantees. So that's one. And then two is like communicate something back to the client to say, here's the audit ID associated with your request.
I think that the audit ID is already included in the response.
Oh, really?
Yeah, the response has the audit ID header set.
The more you know.
Yeah, that's how you can tell a Kubernetes API server from anything else that's listening on
Oh,
the
look,
internet.
changelog 1.8, return audit ID header for troubleshooting. Not troubleshooting, for troubleshooting. Huh.
Yeah, I think I like the idea of having the client audit, call it some sort of audit ID chain. That would have to be a separate field, which is an API change.
Okay, if we do it in a way that someone who doesn't trust clients can still look at their audit logs and like understand which bits came from a client and which bits they can trust, then
Yeah.
I'm much concerned about this. If it becomes like a tracing thing, then that's cool.
Yeah. Do we need a KEP since it's an API change?
You already opened an enhancements bit for it. I don't know. I think describing like sort of the end-to-end flow, since there's a server piece and there's a client piece and there's an audit log piece, which is external facing, I would put together a quick one.
Okay. That
Which
probably
is
means
the
that
priority
until 121 then.
Yeah.
What do you want to put as the priority? I'd put backlog, but after further long term.
Yeah.
Cool.
And you want to assign that to yourself, Tim?
Yeah. Where'd that go?
I can do it. All right. Allowed taint label keys for node restriction and admission controller. Okay. I kind of want this too. What do you think, Jordan? Do the same thing for taints that we do for. Oh wait, no, maybe I'm not understanding this.
Custom node conditions. So I guess I would be asking, like, what are they expecting to be setting and unsetting these? Is it the kubelet? Is it another process running with the kubelet's credentials? The node to self update. Yeah, I guess that would be the first question I would have. Like, where are you envisioning these being set from? If we want to carve out like ones that we consider safe or ones that we consider unsafe, like that could be reasonable. We did that for labels, but like right now the node restriction emission stuff is really oriented towards kubelet callers. Like we assume we know everything they're going to do because we own the kubelet code. Like we, the Kubernetes project, own the kubelet code. And so if this is like, hey, I want to do other things, let's allow those other things, but those don't fall within what the kubelet's doing, like I have questions.
Yeah. I buy it. Okay, so they create a certificate from the CSR API, and it doesn't work against as a client to the Kube API server.
They get an unauthorized error, not a.
That's 401.
Yeah. So that means
Failed to authenticate.
that means they presented credentials and the credentials were rejected. Okay.
I mean, this would be expected in many deployments, right?
And this is Kubeatom, so they've got anonymous auth on. So if.
But they created a CSR.
Yeah.
So I guess is Kubeatom enabling client TLS auth, which probably they must be.
Yeah, there. I'm just so if they get an unauthorized error with a certificate credential, that means the certificate exists and matches the CA that the server is advertising. Otherwise, Go wouldn't even send the client cert. I guess I would ask for like the API server logs at Velocity 4 or something, because you'll see like X509 verification errors or something. I mean, yeah, this is kind of a support request. We try not to do like troubleshoot my installation, which is like, we know these steps work because we have tests that use them, but yeah. It would probably be worth someone sweeping the tutorial they linked to make sure that those steps actually do work. That would be less open-ended than kind of going back and forth with one person. So is there a volunteer to review the guide they linked to and like double check that that produces something that works? Because if not, then we have at least a doc fix to do.
V1 Kube API server client.
It looks plausible.
Looks
to me.
reasonable.
Yeah.
I'll run through it.
Okay. Thank you.
Five seconds OIDC authenticator. Doesn't work on startup. So what is the fix? Block startup? Or is this acceptable? At a readiness check?
What, can you open the commit they linked to? Oh, wow, this is 111. That was a good vintage.
Oh yeah, 2018.
Was this when Eric made it asynchronous? Yeah.
Whoa. How'd this finally end up in our queue? No. Okay, so
Daniel got it.
yeah, 401. I will keep it open in a tab and see if they have respond to Daniel's.
Oh, interesting. The authenticator, when it sets itself up, tries to initialize. Just linked in the chat. Tries to initialize with a poll until, which means that it will wait the linked period before trying for the first time. So it polls every 10 seconds, but it waits 10 seconds before trying the first time. So if it was switched to poll immediate, then that would, I mean, you still have the potential for like the OIDC server to not return this discovery doc fast and it'd have to retry. But in the happy path where the server is available, that would basically make it instant.
Beautiful find. Do you want to send a PR?
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, we're out of time. 25 seconds over. Everybody enjoy the rest of your 2 weeks. And
we will be in code freeze the next time we talk, I guess, or one day before it. So yeah.
Get all those PRs in. All right, bye everyone.